What up? What up? Thanks for being here. Let's get into Luca. Thank you for listening to my Discerning Disney series. This is where I do a psychoanalysis of what I think this movie really represents in different ways that I like to apply things to modern context. So take it with a grain of salt or sand, whatever your preference. And I'm trying to think if there's anything additional to add to this, but really, might as well just walk right into it, huh? Cool. Thanks for being here. Okay, so this movie is set in the 50s in Italy. It's about two little sea monsters, and one of them just lives like a human out and about and goes down underneath the water and collects stuff from sunken ships and shit and brings it back to his own space. And the other one lives with his parents and herds goatfish. And the way that they meet is that one day, the one who herds goatfish, this is Luca, he sees a boat. And he is so curious about these boats. So his mom's like trying to warn him, like fishermen kill us and shit. So like, don't go up there. And he obviously is a kid. So at some point he stumbles across this suit underneath the water and he thinks it's a human being and then finds out that it's another sea monster like himself who's been living up on the land. And this is Alberto, his friend. Alberto's dad left him a long time ago. We don't know when. We just know Alberto's been alone for a long time. And so he thought it was his dad's fault that his dad left. We don't know what happened to his dad. Alberto is very much traumatized from his dad leaving. So at this point, he hasn't made friends. He's just been living in a tower by himself away from the city. Or the town, I should say. Luca stumbles across him and they become friends because Alberto's been doing the human thing for longer. Luca stumbles across him one day and all of a sudden realizes that he can go up to the surface. And so when he does, his body automatically shapeshifts. I find this to be super fascinating. We're going to get into it in another segment. But his body automatically shapeshifts into a human boy. So he doesn't look like a sea monster anymore. And he doesn't notice that at first. At first, he's just shocked that he could go up there with this kid and exist. And he quickly runs back home because he feels like, what has he done? He's not supposed to be doing this. So he quickly feels guilty, goes home, feels shame, but also extreme curiosity because he's now just crossed the limits of the barriers in his mind. That's what I want to get into next. But in a nutshell, these two young boys end up in the town because the parents find out and want to send Luca away. So these two try to rebel. And the entire movie is about them wanting to win this Vespa so that they can get out of this Italian city and go travel the world together. But plot twist, a girl gets involved. And when a girl gets involved, Luca really likes her. So Luca really wants to go to school with her and hang out with her and spend time with her. And Alberto's like, I thought we were going to get this Vespa and like travel the world. Luca's like, well, I don't want to do that anymore. And Alberto's like, yeah, but you're my best friend. And like, now you're all I've got. So I'm going to show this girl who you really are and let's see if she really likes you. And in a nutshell, Luca throws his friend under the bus and is like, oh my God, you're a sea monster. Pretends like he doesn't know. Goes and befriends the little girl. And then the little girl gets kind of hip to the situation. So she shows Luca's true colors by splashing him with water, which is what makes them show themselves as sea monsters. So she splashes him with water, realizes he's a sea monster, and then she stands back and is like, you gotta go for my safety, because now I don't trust you, because you've officially just lied about your friend, and now, to me, whatever. So Luca's kind of sitting back, doesn't know what to do, likely just wants to go home because he feels like he's just screwed up his life with his friends. But at the same time, he doesn't want to go live with his uncle in the deep because his uncle is transparent and terrifying. I don't blame him. So long and short, the end of the movie is awesome, but there's a couple of layers to the process that I want to get into a little bit deeper before I go all the way throughout the movie. So let's get into it next. The idea with Luca transforming from the sea monster to the human without any prompt, like his body just naturally did it. For me, I found this to be really, really fascinating because it says a lot about what we are without recognizing it's what we are. We live completely different lifestyles. Some people really are completely different in their home life and with their friends and with their job. Like this shape-shifting concept of being like, when you're with your family, you're a certain type of person. And when you step out into the world, you become a different person. You get the opportunity to grow new skin, if you will, and live a completely different life. And if your family is traditional and doesn't believe that you should expand into anything different, because this was something that was already innate in Luca. Like, he didn't have to think about it or do anything to switch into a human form. He just did it. That, to me, says so much about how when we step out into the world, we figure out who we really are. And when we get into that mindset where we want to choose how we explore, how we love, how we expand. And the people that love us the most struggle with that because they need us to stay the same because that's what they chose to do, or because that's where their comfort level is. So the opportunity that you might take to go expand and shift into a completely new layer of yourself. It's not like Luca's not still a fucking sea monster. When he gets in the shower, he's a sea monster, you know? He doesn't got to wash that human body. But there's like layers to understanding how he's developing more understandings of himself. Who knows what kind of like powers could come out of what he's already doing, you know? I really found the correlation of this with the Matrix to be very, very cool. Like the way that Neo wakes up in a brand new fucking world. I found this to be so, parallel in that regard. And the difference being that initially Neo doesn't get to just like walk back into the Matrix, but Neo figures out eventually that he can just walk between the fucking two of them. Like he's Neo, you know? What a trip. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next segment. As with all Disney movies, there's undertones with family, undertones with friendship, and I think these are things that are easily dissectable. I like to point them out as they are in the particular plot line, because once again, as mentioned with Raya and the Last Dragon, as mentioned with Toy Story, Disney has a way of doing really interesting undertones with chemistry. In this, you have two boys who are besties. One is a little more masculine, one is a little more feminine. There's always one who's a little more dominant and one who's a little more timid. That's masculine and feminine qualities. The reason why I keep pointing this out is because if people understood the power of this in the world, not just in Disney fucking characters, but in masculine, feminine as the world, the way that we carry ourselves, the power and the versatility of this, it would help us create a more balanced and unified experience. People think that when you speak about unity, you're talking about trying to create some sort of euphoric, transformational experience where everybody's operating in peace. And that's not even realistic. What we're trying to do is create a harmony. We're trying to understand that we are all different instruments, and collectively there's like a group of saxophones over there, there's a piano group over there, there is a group of flutes over there, and a group of clarinets, there's a handful of triangles. What we're trying to do is understand that all of these things are different parts of an orchestra, and that we each have different spaces that we fit into as well in each of these different components. So the idea is that while there isn't one way, there's different tribal collective ways to get to the same notion. We're all playing in the same song. We're all playing in the same melody. We're all moving in that same direction. That to me is really, really cool. That's a neat observation to take away from these masculine, feminine dynamics that I'm trying to portray, right? So then you have this little girl who comes along, and she's like the perfect example of she's a little girl, so she's feminine, but she's got masculine traits to her. She's tough as fuck. She's left brain. She likes science. She likes to build. She likes to think of things in compartmentalized, build ways. The left brain is associated with creating a hierarchy. It's associated with creating categories. It's associated with putting things in order, having things go in sequence. The right brain is just associated with seeing the whole thing, seeing the whole encompassing thing, and then trying to see all sides of it. The right brain just wants to see all the pieces at once, hold them all together, and then maybe take a look at one, but look at it interdimensionally, look at it from this angle and that angle, try to understand it, right? When they synchronize together, we have things like what I'm doing right now, like a podcast, where what I'm doing is synchronizing my ideas with my left brain by speaking them to you, by functionally coordinating my sentences and functionally coordinating my storytelling and trying to keep it as sequential as possible. I'm using my right brain to project into my left brain so that I can bring it to the forefront. Music does this. Dancing does this. Handwriting or scribing does this. Singing does this. There's all sorts of cool things in the world where masculine and feminine, left and right brain are taking place. And we're just not getting deep enough into the concepts of this to look at our lives intrinsically. Like being able to stand back and take a moment to really, really take in the concept of how big life is. So with that, I'm going to leave that right there. We'll be moving on to the next segment with Luca before we close out. Of course, one of the premises to the movie is going to be that there's a bully who wants to just continue to be the pompous, arrogant guy on campus, if you will. And the little girl who is friends with the two little boys, sea monster boys, that she doesn't know are sea monsters until later, has been trying to win this race and wants to win this race that this little pompous, arrogant kid has been winning every year, which is what makes him continue to reassert himself the way he does. So she's trying to go up against him, and then she wants to settle it up with these two friends of hers who are sea monsters. So they figure out how to choose which part of the competition they're all going to participate in, and they organize, the process and make it happen between the three of them, or at least that's what they're working towards. So when the little bully in the town figures out that these two are sea monsters, he intends to kill the two of them. So they're trying to flee the town, but the little girl decides to intercept. So she crashes her bike into this kid, hurts herself, and tries to essentially help them. So the boys turn back to try and help her after she crashes her bike, and they are defended by her father to the rest of the people. He points out that they've also crossed the finish line, so they also win the race itself when all this actually happens at the same time. Once that happens, the other disguised sea monsters reveal themselves, including Luca's family. So there's more people in this town that are actually sea monsters. And the townsfolk welcome them happily, which I find to be very, very refreshing, considering in movies like Beauty and the Beast, they did not do that kind of thing with the Beast, right? They were they had pitchforks and shit. So the little bully doesn't want to accept the changes, of course, because that's always how it goes. So his little cronies that have been following him around all of a sudden are not afraid to go against him because the rest of the town is now officially calling him an asshole. So that ends up happening to them. Now, the cool part about the end of it is this dynamic between the three of them. Alberto really has an attachment to Luca emotionally, but he realizes that Luca has an attachment to, I think her name's Julia. Luca still has an emotional attachment to her, and Luca really likes to learn. He wants to go read books and shit. That's what they bond over, is astronomy and school and shit like that. Alberto ends up selling the Vespa in order for Luca to have a train ticket so that he can go to school with Julia. Everybody lives happily ever after. It's cute that it's a love story. I find it to be really cool that what they're trying to do is take this process of a character who ostracizes people and make it the not norm. They're trying to make the weird more normal than the norm, if you will. And that's cool to me. In some capacity, it's because they also want to remove people from an understanding of organic human nature and the value of organic human nature. There's something to be said for that, but there's other movies that I can discuss that in more depth, so I won't go too far into that with this one because it's not the main thing that I wanted to take away from this movie. That first main thing I wanted to take away was discussing the transformation process. This other main takeaway is discussing how the townsfolk actually received the situation. And then, of course, as always, I love talking about the relational processes between the characters that are happening here, and especially with these kids, because they're thinking about big emotions. when they're going through these relationships. We're not really too concerned with that, but what is actually being addressed here has way more to do with emotional ties and emotional process. At the core of it, it's Disney trying to, dare I say, program your children. That's my ghost toy in the background. Yes, dare I say, Disney's trying to program your fucking children. Part of why they want to create these thruples and these kind of situations is because they're trying to also impart certain understandings of masculine and feminine on children sooner than necessary. So, as much as I like to do the psychoanalysis of this, I don't want to not say that I don't think Disney's a fucking dark programming tool that's used on the masses, 100%. I'm trying to find silver linings and shit, but there's a lot of deep layers to this. And that's actually what I want to talk about in the next segment, but I'm going to break down some other cool shit in the next one that I don't even want to put a spoiler alert to, so I cannot wait for you to get there. So let's go there. All right, let me tell you the whole truth. This movie was not on my list. It was not on my radar, like at all. And my friend was like, you need to do one on Luca. And I was like, what are you talking about, right? Like, wait a minute, I gotta throw Luca in the mix now? And my friend was like, I think there's something to Bruno that gets mentioned in Luca. And I said, what? And my friend goes, I think that Bruno is Alberto's dad. And I'm like, what? You know? And I literally was like, I've been racking my brain on this. Like, in the sense that I've been like, how am I gonna tie this in? So today, as I was getting ready to prepare for this episode, I researched this theory. And there actually is like a whole theory behind it. My friend literally pulled this out of the ether. It was like, I just had a hunch that this is what this was. And I've said it out loud before that I think that Bruno is Alberto's dad. And when I went and researched it today, I was like, yo, this is a whole theory. Okay, so a couple of layers to it. Number one is that the timing actually works out. This theory breaks it all down, but roughly both of these things, as far as Encanto and what's taking place in Luca, are happening in the 50s, like in this between the 50s and 60s time frame. So the time frame that Bruno actually left the house would have worked out for him having a child, and then abruptly leaving the child, potentially to go back to Colombia to deal with the vision, knowing that the vision was about to come true. So I think this was like fascinating. And then it also is like true to form that Bruno runs away from his family. Like he abandons his family, right? So it's dark, it's Disney. So it is what it is, right? Like, yeah, I'm not going to say that that's not a Disney vibe, but I thought this was such an important, when they call them Easter eggs, that when my friend mentioned this to me, and I was like, all right, now I'm going to watch this movie again, because I've watched it, but only in bits and pieces and hadn't really gotten all the way through. I think that most Disney movies are pretty self-explanatory for the overall lesson. So it seems silly to go all the way through an entire series of podcasts where I'm just like, this one's about friendship and this one's about trust. So when I'm looking at these, what I'm looking for is a undertone layer of different aspects of this psychologically. And so when this came to me with Luca, I was like, yo, that brings in a whole new layer to the underbelly of Disney's television shows, right? So anyway, all right, that's where I'm at with this. And I'm going to go ahead and make an outro. Man, I can't believe I didn't thoroughly explain that a little bit better in the previous chapter, but Alberto's the little boy who is with Luca, and he's the one whose dad left him, and he's been here, and he teaches Luca how to be a human. Alberto, every time he's doing something dangerous, and the voice in his brain is telling him, don't do that, he shouts out, Silencio Bruno, which is basically silence, Bruno. Kind of like we don't talk about Bruno. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do Encanto next. Encanto's coming a couple of episodes down the way. But I find this to be such a cool gem. So I'm going to just harp back into that one more time for this outro. And then I'm going to say, listen, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm sorry it was kind of way out of left field. This wasn't, like I said, something I was expecting to do. But I am really glad that I got to get into it because it gave me that Matrix feel. When I watched Luca all over again, I was like, yo, there's way more to this. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.